two guys with real heavy voices. I opened the door and started to put my foot down onto the ground. But dozens of hands took hold of me. My legs, my arm, my body. No one heard the sentences I spoke. I found myself lying in the prostate position, up on top of the crowd, in the center of an ocean of heads that extended out as far as the eye could see. Then I started to sink down in the ocean and was buoyed up again. Thousands of voices mingled in a roar. Men were shouting and stumbling. My head and shoulders went down and up, down and up, and down and up once more. It was like drowning in a human sea. I lost sight of the spirit of St. Louis. I heard several screams. I was afraid I would be dropped into the feet of those knowing, cheering people. And then after sitting in a cockpit fixed position for close to 34 hours, my muscles would be too stiff to struggle up again. I tried to sit up. I tried to slip down into the crowd. I tried to roll over onto my hands and knees. It was useless. I was simply wasting my strength that I might need for a final effort to save myself. If my head angled beneath my feet too far, it seemed wisest to relax as much as I could and to let time pass. I realized that the men under me were determined that no matter what happened to them, I would not fall. I read this excerpt the other night to Stacy. And it's not out of the Bible. My dad was a pilot. I didn't get to see him fly. But my dad's first idol was Charles A. Lindbergh. And he gave me this book. It is so simple, but it's so poignant. There's a plane inscripted on the front. It's etched out, silver. It's not like the Spirit of St. Louis. It's not like the flashy books of today. But it says it all. That's Dad. The writing on the side is faded, but it says Spirit of St. Louis. The Lindbergh's name's on the top. Like I said, that was Dad's first idol. When I opened the book and I showed Stacy, it was real poignant to me, and it really hit me like a ton of bricks. It was signed by Evelyn on Christmas in 1953. Evelyn was his stepmom. She grew up in New York. She was an educator, though. And she was the person that taught Dad more than anybody how to read and get an education and how vital and important it was. You see, my dad he was raised in New York, and he had separated parents. They split up when he was a kid. That wasn't very common back then. Actually, it was illegal in New York. But my dad lived with his mother, Cecilia. And she knew that she couldn't take care of him. And when Granddad married Evelyn and lived in California, she sent her beloved son, Paul, out to be with them. She didn't look at the personal battles or relationships or anything else. All she was worried about was that my dad got the proper care, proper education, and he knew he'd get that with Granddad and Evelyn. The picture that I saw inside the book kind of perfectly illustrates my dad's life. You see the ocean down below, and it's wavy, it's not smooth. You don't get many smooth days at sea. And you see the plane flying up above it. The sea, to me, represents my dad's life. Not always easy, many ups and downs, and then the struggles with cancer at the end. The plane to me represents where he was going after he left us that night. When I went over to the house on Friday night when Dad passed away, John was there with Tink, Ashley, and they were talking to Dad just like all the other times that we were over there. Tink was going to go home and John was going to leave. That was just normal protocol. That's what we do. The new man came in to take care of the duty, kind of, so to speak. When Tate left this time, I asked my brother to stay, to help out. But I knew more than anything, I was asking him to stay because I wanted him to be there with me, because I knew this might be the end. And he stayed there. And Mom and John helped change Dad as he did several times before, and I held him when he started to go. John and Mom were still just doing what they do. They took care of Dad. And they couldn't stop. It was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. But for a minute I said, you guys need to stop. And they said, we love you, Paul, and we love you, Dad. When Dad took his last breath, my brother John sank over in the seat in the corner. John's a real strong guy. And his brother that I could look up to. And he asked, what am I going to do now? Because he'd been coming over and visiting Dad every single day, helping him get up, walk down the stairs, and just help him do everything. The cool thing about it was, the next morning John came in, he still had tears in his eyes. Emotions aren't something that he's always shown. But that shows you that how much he loved his father. We were sitting there reading the paper together, looking at each other, talking about the Giants and kind of like being guys, just trying not to bring up what had happened. Mom came over behind John and put her hands on his shoulders, and she saw his eyes, and she said, you lost your buddy. And he did. If you've ever been up to our cabin and looked at the upstairs room, John helped Dad build that. If you look at the room downstairs, the game room, my brother was down there digging the dirt and helping him put up the walls because he was a better worker than all of us. When they were building that room, I remember I was a young kid, I don't know how old. I remember I'm going to go down and help Dad, and I'm going to try to be like John. I took the pickaxe and I swung it over my head, swung it as hard as I can. It heard so much noise, it felt so strong, and the lights went out, it was such a strong. Next thing you know, you hear Dad yelling up to Mom, Nora, get this goddamn kid out of here. Take him down to the lake or something. Sorry, John. You got to complete the work. That was Dad's way. He was firm, strong, and when he was done with you, he told you. What Dad did for me later that day was he came up into the room, he always had a bit of a sense of humor, and he handed me a paintbrush. And he said, you know what, when we start painting the room, I think this will be a perfect job for you. We spent many days in the lake, and we had a lot of fun. And John and Dad were just like best of friends like we all were. I do have another brother, his name is Paul. A couple years ago, we had a Christmas party. And it was my favorite time ever because I got to get up and speak and say something that I needed to say. And my dad was there too. In the background, I could still hear his voice saying, yeah, yeah, and now hurry up. And everybody cried. Took the lead. And he acted like the older brother that I always wanted, as I said before. Paul's relationship with Dad was a little bit different and strained probably at first, because he was different personality-wise than Dad. Paul's calm, reserved, he thinks things out, very calculating. Dad was down to it in New York. He said what he meant what he said, you better do it right now. And when he told Paul to do things right now, Paul decided to think about it a little bit. But you know what? Every time I was over at Dad's house and there was a race on, the phone would ring. Anytime something important happened in a race, it would be Paul on the other side, saying, what did you think of that crash, or what did you think of that turn? And Dad would respond back to him, what do you think, Mario Andretti just lost again in the 8500. And then there's my sister Julie. There's been many, many times that everybody in the family said one of the boys were the favorites. They picked me because I was the youngest. They picked John because he was the prodigal son. They picked Paul because he was perfect. I don't think he ever had a diaper in his life. But Dad would tell me that he always gave Julie a little bit more slack. Because he reminded him most of himself, for one, and for two, he knew she was going to get enough heck from Mom just because she was female. But Dad did respect Julie, and he loved the fact that she wouldn't just stay stagnant. She got her degree in animal health care, and she moved around the country. She moved to Arizona. She actually traveled to the Virgin Islands after she got her degree. And that when we took many trips up and down the coast when Julie lived in San Diego. One of my favorite trips was when we brought the piano to you. We got in the yellow truck, and this was kind of my time with Dad. But we got in the yellow truck, we picked up the cabin, we drove down to Temecula to bring the piano to Julie. When we were driving down, we just had so many stories and so much fun. It's one of those things in my head, I tried to think before I knew I was going to do this, like, you know, what did Dad and I do together? And there's just so much. But on this trip, we kind of encompassed it all when we were just together. We were in the cockpit of the truck driving down, and we went to Harris Ranch, I remember, and had a great lunch. And we got to talk and share about times and talk about sports. When we got closer to your house, I don't know if you know this part of the story, I looked over at the gauge, and I noticed the gauge on the truck was starting to get to empty. Dad looked over at me and said, "No problem. I got." And I still noticed that the gauge was still empty. Next thing I noticed, Dad was leaning forward a little bit, so I figured I'd lean forward too, maybe that'll help. Dad put the truck in neutral, put a little bit of gas into the throttle. He kind of had that look like he must have looked when he was flying as a pilot. We coasted down through that stop sign coming into Temecula and stopped at the Texaco, filled up both tanks. Dad looked at me as he got back into the truck, and he said, "You know what, a good co-pilot never waits until the end of a journey to check the gauges." Screwed up. And then I had that puppy laugh. So that was part of my dad's charm. I never took any offense to his jokes, and I love him very much. When we lost him the other night, I knew that I lost my best friend. I lost someone that believed in me no matter what I did, no matter how much right or wrong. I tried to follow in his footsteps as a tool guy, and I did okay. When I made moves to different companies, he was always there to support me and show me the right way. As we were talking about a minute ago, Dad was a huge Giants fan, and just huge sports fans. I love those Sundays when Mom would be coming up and down the stairs, bringing down the sausages, the pizzas, the hot dogs, all kinds of stuff. And last October, which I think is the best month out of the year, probably because my birthday's October 9th, but because the weather in the Bay tends to be the best. The Giants got to Game 5, and I said, "I'm not going to miss this no matter what. They're one game away from the series." And I got to sit down with Dad, and I got to hold his hand. My friend Ron was there. And we just went crazy. And I hugged Dad, and we celebrated. You know, those things that you think are very important as far as the team's concerned aren't very important at all. The most important thing is the relationships that bond because of it. When I got home that night after going out on the town and honking horns with the kids and Stacy and Ron, I went back inside the house. I went back up to the room where Dad was in bed. And I went to the corner of the room. What I had done many times as a kid. You see, whenever games were on, when I was growing up, Dad and I would talk about sports right before he went to bed when he was reading his book. This time I walked in and gave him a kiss. I said, "What do you think, Dad? We just won the World Series." He said, "Yeah, that Linsicum's pretty good." He said, "I love you too." And I said, "You taught me everything." And he said, "I know." Mom, when this journey started with cancer, your vows were challenged. I can't think of anyone that's lived up to those vows better than you have. In sickness and in health, for as long as we both shall live, takes on new meaning to me now. When I was with Snap on board, Foxwood told me once that he'd never seen you two apart. And that was true. Whenever after you got out of the military and you were doing your business with Snap-on, I don't think you were apart more than a day. And that gave me a great foundation to look up to and live up to. When we found out about the cancer 7 years ago, when we had 3 months, as Alex said, I remember seeing John downstairs and he said, "No, that ain't gonna happen. We're gonna keep going." My goal was to get to their 50th anniversary. No, we did. When we had the 50th anniversary party, we had all my brothers and sisters there. And we had food and cake and all that kind of stuff the night before. But I had a different plan in my head. I had something that I had dreamed about doing the day that I knew my dad was sick. So I found out where they got married, and I went down to the mission. I took Stacy and the kids, and we walked up to a church. The church that 50 years before, my mom and dad became one. We walked up to the church, it wasn't too full. And we ended up getting in the front row. As we seated Dad, he had his cane in, he wasn't in the water or anything, so his health was actually pretty decent. I went back and talked to the priest. And I said, "You know, it's my parents' 50th anniversary. If you could do something for me, I'd really appreciate it." The priest came up and did his mission prayer. And he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 special guests here today. May I introduce you to Paul E Sturm. 50 years ago today, at this very spot, got married." Could you imagine walking in that room, not knowing what kind of mess it was going to be? Could you imagine, I had a 6-month-old. I just wanted to know Dad. My son Tyler and Sarah got to see their parents got to see their grandparents get a standing ovation in a church where nobody knew them. The glow on their faces was so special. When we were leaving the church that day, and the priest did a great job of titling and everything, we were walking out and everyone was coming up shaking hands with Mom and Dad. As I was walking out, Dad grabbed my hand and kind of walked down the center aisle together. And I kind of joked with him. I said, "Isn't it funny 50 years ago you're walking down the aisle with Mom and now you got a schlub like me?" You know, but the cool thing was what Dad said to me then is he said, "Look back at your mother. Look at all the people around her. Look how happy she is." He said, "She deserves it because she's the best." When I got out of the church that day, I took Mom and Dad to Presidio. I showed them showed the kids where they had the reception afterwards. We had a great lunch with the kids and a great celebration. Dad at that time told me about his best man, Philip. When you talk about soul, and you think if your soul is still alive, I think it still is. The day Dad left, my mom said, "That doesn't look like him anymore." I guess the tent may not look like him anymore, Mom. But I'm sure that soul does. You see, Philip, Dad's best man at the wedding, took Dad's flight 50 years ago that Dad could have been on. Philip's plane crashed off the coast of Hawaii, and Philip didn't make it. None of this would have happened. None of us would be here. Dad, of course, said that he would because he was a better pilot. There's another picture in this book, though, that means a lot to me. And my wife, Stacy, said to me the night I told her Dad died, she said, well, he's with his father now, and he'd been saying for weeks that he misses his dad. His picture was right next to him. The Spirit of St. Louis has landed. And I think Dad's landed. I think he had a plane. I think he's out on the wing right now. Or he was out on the wing when he made it. And I think he looked down and he saw Granddad sticking up his hand. I think Granddad took him down and gave him a hug. I think he sees his grandmother there. I think he sees Evelyn, Cecile, Carrie. I think the crowd's going to part a little bit. And the way I see it is Dad's going to see another guy in uniform. I think he's going to salute him. I think he's going to say thank you to Philip. Thank you for letting me spend 50 years with my idol, Laura.